Hi, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here. I had the pleasure at the very first Web3 Summit speaking here many, many years ago, speaking about Ocean Protocol in the early days. And since then, it's been wonderful to see the evolution of Polkadot and Web3 and so on. And it was also very nice to see Ian speak, one of the OGs of OGs speaking about trust and so on. Today, I'm going to talk also something relating to trust, and maybe the thing where you really need to trust your very own thoughts. Because what if your thoughts leak to the world, to Meta, that goes on to NSA, et cetera? That's kind of a problem, right? And there is an evolutionary path where this is a high chance of happening. Fortunately, there's some things we can do about it. And that's just a side effect related to AI risk. So I'm going to get into all of this in this talk in a short amount of time, but I'll be around for questions afterwards. Let's get started. Accelerating brain interfaces with a Web3 twist. So what's the motivation? Every day we wake up and read the news on X or otherwise and see how AI keeps advancing. On average, AI is getting about 10x smarter per year. And what's driving that in a large way is Moore's law, is more and more compute. For example, GPT-3 was about an Avogadro count number of flops to train GPT-3. GPT-4, 100x that. The next generation from OpenAI, O1, was about 100x that. And it keeps going. And this is the case for each of the different companies, Grok 2 to 3 to 4, et cetera, et cetera. So compute is growing as model capability advances. Here's another plot showing the same thing. The x-axis is time. The y-axis is amount of compute. And the y-axis, you see it's overall a straight line, right? But the y-axis is logarithmic, which means that the straight line really means a logarithmic growth, 10x, 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 10x on the y-axis. So compute is growing as model capability advances. So there's more and more compute into this. But another way to twist it around is to get more intelligence, we can just throw more compute. This is called the bitter lesson, as coined by Richard Sutton, a famous AI researcher. And so in the next coming years, and in the past few years, for the next coming years, we're going to see these increases, 10x, 100x, 1,000x increases in compute, therefore increases in intelligence, and also increases in agency, right? We can count the the orders of magnitude, if you will. And as the go up, the intelligence goes up from preschooler level intelligence of the early LLMs to elementary school to smart high schooler to PhD level, which is sort of what Grok 4 is at right now. And on to fully automated AI research and so on, right? And along with this, there's also an unhobbling happening, right? At first, it was just pretty simple. The interface was kind of wonky. But then we came back to chat, and that turned out to be a way more powerful interface than people realized. The Eliza of the 70s was a chat interface too with AI, but it was really so weak that it didn't really matter. Now we have agents. That's really changing the dynamics once again. And there will be more unhobblings to come. For example, AI is living on-chain, being self-sovereign, all of this, right? So this is happening. And it's really important to understand why this might be happening. At the heart of it is there's a ton of money to be made. NVIDIA is now the most valuable company in the world. They're supplying the tools to the AI revolution, right? In their case, the chips. TSMC, manufacturing these chips, they're also growing like crazy. And many startups at the highest level, the OpenAIs and XAIs of the world. So there's tons of money to be made, not just now, but in the next 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, as well as power to be retained. If you're USA, if you're China, you better not get behind in the AI race, otherwise you'll be left in the dust. We can talk about Europe there too, potentially. So overall, there's a lot of money to be made. There's a lot of power to be retained. And because of that, we have these increases in compute, intelligence, and agency that are happening. And what this is leading to is an intelligence explosion. Right now, we've had narrow AI for decades, right? I used to do narrow AI for chip design, for designing computer chips with more resilience and so on. But now we're getting close to AGI, right? Where it's artificial general intelligence, where it can do all tasks that previously a human could only do, right? And then beyond that, something called ASI, and I'll get into that. So AGI, once again, beyond narrow AI, it's artificial general intelligence, can do all the tasks that only a human could previously do. But then we get to AI superintelligence, or artificial superintelligence. And in this case, it can do all tasks at a level far exceeding a human. And this sounds like science fiction because it is science fiction. But money and engineering have a funny way of bringing science fiction into reality. So the thing is, AI superintelligence is coming, because I've talked about in the previous slides how we're getting these 10x's a year, partly from Moore's law, partly from other things. And so the rate of progress, the y-axis can be a general concept of progress. You can call it progress for humanity or civilization or otherwise. And we're really at the knee of the curve right now. Things are about to explode, right? Because it's exponential. And one of the big questions we should ask is, we know that these AIs are going to become superintelligences, and so they're going to be advancing progress-wise. But what about us? What about us as humans? Now, one way you could frame this is, AI safety, AI risk, and all that. Another way is a very simple story. So think about ants, like the insects. Imagine a bunch of ants came up to me and said, "Dear Trent, we would like you to realign yourself, to change your values to be aligned with ant values." And remember, ants are about 1,000x dumber than me, give or take, right? So if I was to change my values to be aligned with ant values, I would be really losing a lot, right? And of course, I'd be like, "No way, go away." And if they come and they start biting me and stuff, I might stomp on them because, we consider them a lower form of intelligence, if you will. And they are. I mean, there's no question. The order as a magnitude lower. But now, imagine if there are intelligences that are 1,000x we as humans, right? So just as we are gods to the ants, these superintelligences will be like gods to us. Just as the ants can't conceive the level of intelligence that we might have, they just don't have the intelligence themselves. It's really, really tough for us to conceive the intelligence that these superintelligences might have, right? And that's really kind of the crux of the problem of people talking about AI risk and stuff. And so in the future, we're definitely going to have these superintelligences out there, right? So much money to be made, so much power to be retained, that this will happen. The question is, will humans be a part of it, right? That's the big question. So how can humanity play a role in the future given superintelligence? And I thought about this long and hard for decades, honestly, going back to the 90s and early 2000s. And written about it quietly here and there, although back then I wasn't that well known. I didn't have a track record, so if I spoke about it too publicly, I'd probably be considered crazy. Maybe now you can consider me crazy too, but at least I have a track record. So here's what I believe. For humanity to play a role in the future, we need a competitive substrate to connect biology to silicon, and ultimately unbound ourselves from biology. BCI is a bridge, brain-computer interfaces. So I've got my meat-bag brain, my biological brain, and I need to somehow link that to the 1,000x, the millionx compute power that silicon brings, and do it in a way where it's part of me. That's the goal. And with that, we just might achieve human superintelligence to compete with AI superintelligence. That's the goal here. And it's a crazy-sounding goal, but there's a path, and this is what I'm going to talk about here. So for this path, the first thing I need to do is just take a couple minutes to teach you guys a bit about current BCI devices, current devices for brain-computer interfaces. So very basic. This is arguably not BCI, but simply eye tracking, right? So you can point cameras or point other electronics at our eyes and track our eyes moving. And you can even do analysis of high-res images of our eyes and understand things that way, right? And this is very useful, and it feels like BCI simply because we don't consciously move our eyes around. They just do, right? I mean, we can, but they're moving around anyway on their own. So that's a very basic, but let's get to things that are clearly brain-computer interfaces. EEG, electroencephalography. All of these are mouthfuls, by the way. EEG has been around since the 70s and before, and it's simply measuring electrical signals on the surface of your scalp. If you're measuring electrical signals anywhere else in your body, that's called myoelectronics. But on your scalp, it's EEG. And so here's an example of an EEG helmet. You got to give credit. A lot of the EEG manufacturers make their helmets look like sci-fi, so I think that's great. And so this is a very straightforward technology. It's been around for a long time. It's not the greatest for SNR, but it's still has its uses. Then there's something called FNIRS, functional near-infrared spectroscopy. And what this does is, it turns out that your skull, you can actually shine infrared light through your skull. So what you can do is you can shine infrared light through your skull and detect changes in blood flow as your thoughts change. And that's what FNIRS does. So you can basically start to peek inside the skull. You can go even farther with something called fMRI, which takes a room-sized magnet to detect blood flow. But it takes a room-sized magnet and costs a couple $1 million. There's also going further towards invasive, like what Neuralink is doing, where you're actually implanting the chips inside the person, right? So you crack open the skull, you insert the chip, and then you have these electrodes that measure neuron activity, right? And there's starting to be some pretty cool breakthroughs, right, for people that have locked-in syndrome that can move around, or at least move a mouse around right now, using these implants. Although, of course, this is a bit creepy or scary to those of us who don't have loss of motor control. And you can even go something even more sci-fi sounding. It turns out you can inject the needle, have it do some basic genetic tweaking to you such that when your neurons fire, they're also firing photons, and then you can pick up those photons being fired with special electronics like FNIRs. And that's called optogenetics. It was invented in the mid-2000s and keeps getting better and better, and it's had human trials for a couple of years now. So what I just gave you was a very brief overview of some of the BCI technologies out there. Now, though, let's use that as a starting point and see what's out there in terms of things that are towards consumer level and otherwise. So there's a company called Neurable that has headphones, and the headphones sense the electrical signals around your ears, the EEG signals, and they use that to assess if you're focusing or not. And so they want you to be in focus, but if you fall out of focus, it'll give you a ping and say, hey, you're out of focus, right? And I think that's quite nice. This is one of the things that EEG can do is measure focus level brain states, things like that. You can also do typing. This has actually been one of the things for EEG since the 70s. And in the 70s, it was very bad, right? But by about the year 2012 or so, people were able to have EEG to type at roughly the speed of an average typer. Out of China, at Tsinghua University in China, 2012, they got about 20 words per minute. And these days, it's not that much faster yet because they're incorporating LLMs and so on. And this is very useful for people like Stephen Hawking with locked-in syndrome. How did he write his books? Partly with the help of EEGs. Other technologies that are emerging, this isn't BCI per se, but it's very helpful for some of the things I'll talk about shortly here. Subtitles on glasses. There's a startup called Even Realities, and they basically have glasses. They're augmented reality glasses, if you will, but they're not trying to do a full repainting of the world. It's just simply subtitles. And subtitle technology like that has been around since the 70s as well with LCDs, but now it's come to the consumers in a nice, clean product. Another product that's come to market that's actually doing very well, it came to market over a year ago, the Ray-Ban Meta smart glasses. And these are Ray-Ban glasses. They look like regular Ray-Ban glasses, and they've got video camera on them, or like a camera that takes video and movies, video and photos, sorry, as well as a microphone. And then that information goes to your smartphone and can be processed in various ways. It also has speakers, actually bone conduction to be precise, so you can hear things. So it's a really nice way if you want to walk around in the sun and it's a hot day, you need sunglasses, but you also want to, say, have a conversation with someone. You can wear Meta Ray-Bans, and it's a very nice experience. I have a pair, and I think they're great, actually. And this is probably the first consumer AR-ish device, augmented reality-ish device. It's the first AR-ish device that has sold millions, right? All the ones prior to it, they sold 100,000 plus max, but not a million or 10 million. But these are doing really well. So well that just last week, Meta announced an investment into Ray-Ban of $2.5 billion. And Ray-Ban is actually owned by Luxottica, which is a much bigger organization that also owns a bunch of other brands. So that's coming. Of course, Meta and others are doing VR. The Quest, and the most recent Quest, the Quest 3, has augmented reality built in, so it's got some repainting of reality. But these things are heavier. I can't wear it for more than 30 minutes because it's just too heavy and it starts to hurt. But it's getting there. Another version of AR is the Apple Vision Pro, came out about 6 months ago. And it's got built-in eye tracking. And basically, it has the best repainting of reality. The repainting of reality is so good that if you have a wine glass in front of you, a real one, and it repaints another one next to it, you can't tell the difference. So that tech is already there. The race right now is to get that tech to be small enough to fit in Ray-Ban style sunglasses or smaller. You can also have DIY. So in this case, this guy lost his eye to cancer. So what did he do? He put a flashlight in the eye socket, and now he has a built-in eye. So, and there's other DIY stuff happening, but this is just a fun example. So I've talked about this overall challenge. How do we augment our own intelligence such that we, as humans and humanity, might be competitive with superintelligences that emerge? I've talked about brain-computer interface technologies, such as EEG, FNIRs, and so on. And I've also talked about existing consumer applications on the market. But where is this going to go, right? Where could we go such that ultimately we end up at human superintelligence? So I'm going to talk about that, where we're headed in the near term, and farther and farther out. So to start with, Meta, with their Orion project, has announced they are building glasses. This is a photo of them. They're still pretty thick. It costs about $10,000, and they repaint reality at higher resolution. And you control it with a myoelectric device measuring the electrical signals on your wrist with this wristband, right? And so you walk around, you're twitching, and you're controlling a mouse or whatever it is you need to control, right? Interestingly, that was foreshadowed in a science fiction book called Accelerando 20 years ago. So this thing is coming, and Meta sees that it's, this is a hugely profitable thing to go for because this could eat the smartphone. So that's coming. And of course, it's not just Meta going for this. They've been the most public, but Google famously partnered with Samsung for this, going for it. And Apple is going for this now, too. They're basically taking the Apple Vision Pro technology and trying to put it into a form factor of glasses because they see that that's what's winning. Where do we get from there, then? Well, imagine we've got these glasses with not just myoelectric, but now maybe we have EEGs to type with. So imagine you have that. You can start to do SMing, silent messaging, sending text or voice by thinking about it. By the way, this phrase SMing is also from another famous sci-fi novel called Rainbow's End, 2006. So here's what SMing is. How do you send? Well, you type by thinking about it. You've got a screen in front of you to help you figure out the letters. And then you simply receive the subtitles and glasses, like I showed you a few slides ago from Even Realities or otherwise, right? So that's what SMing can be. And this feels like a pragmatic form of telepathy, right? I'm able to message you, and you can message back to me without moving our hands, without moving our fingers, just by thinking about it, right? And this is technology that's possible today. It just needs to get to a form factor to hit the masses. Another one, we already have, with the Meta glasses, you can already chat with their AI, Llama, right now. But you chat in voice. You talk to it, it talks back to you in audio, right? But now imagine where you're just doing this by typing, using your EEG or other BCI, and then it responding to you either in voice or in text back to your vision. By the way, getting information back into you is always easy because our eyes are super high bandwidth. So we don't need to try to have fancy techniques to write to the brain. We could, but we don't need to, right? And of course, it's a lot less icky to have weird new techniques to write to the brain. So in terms of consumer adoption, using vision as the main input is useful. And of course, audio too. So internal dialogue, you chat with LLM for Q&A search by thinking about it. Keeping going, perfect memory. So imagine you walk around, you've got these glasses, and you're recording video of everything all the time, all your interactions, right? Well, it turns out there's also technology out there where using fMRI and so on, it records what's going on in your visual cortex, which is at the back of your head here. And then from that, it uses modern AI image generation technologies to generate an image of what you're thinking. And it turns out to be pretty accurate, like shockingly good, right? Like 75% plus. The accurate stuff these days is still on these big $2 million fMRI machines, but it's getting better and better. There's work on EEG and more. So imagine then you're recording the video. It's stored in some database that you control. And then to query your memories, you just think of an image. Maybe you think of sitting down at the breakfast table in the morning, and it pulls up an image of what you ate for breakfast. And then you have that memory, right? So we really could have perfect memory. And by the way, it brings that up, and then it could display on the screen to you. So this is not that far off. This is not a scientific mystery anymore. This is an engineering problem. So it feels like sci-fi, but it's actually really pretty close. Another one, of course, once you have perfect memory for yourself, you can share these to others, right? So it's Instagram for the brain, if you will, right? You can send to your friend's phone or to their AR glasses and so on. Also, content creation. Right now, right, if I want to write a blog post, I'll sit down, I'll type in some, and I want images for the blog post. I'll sit down, I'll type in some text, and it'll give me some images. But it's not quite what I want, so I keep tweaking the query, changing the query, this and this and this. And ultimately, it's maybe 95% there, so then I have to go into some image editor and tweak it around some more, and maybe even AI-assisted image editor. But it takes me 30 minutes to have something good, typically, right? But imagine instead where instead of text to image, it's brain image to image. So I think of the image in my brain that I want. It uses that to generate the image on screen, and then it's not quite good, so I kind of tweak in my brain. I think of tweaks of how to change it in my brain, and it instantly updates on the computer, right, in front of me. And this is very useful for things like creating new, straight-up visual images for blog posts, but then also for TV, for film, for video game design, and so on, right? So there's a ton of opportunities here. where it's, it's the next level of content creation. Think about video games where there's 10 people running around in a Quake-style arena, but then there's a dungeon master that's imagining what the shape of this arena is in real time for everyone else, right? Or exploring some whole new world with Mario-style characters running around. So super fast content creation is a huge opportunity. Super powered prosthetics with low latency response. This is coming. This is something that Neuralink and others are working on quite aggressively. Right now, they're using it to fix people that have problems, but at some point, it will go gray market and black market to augment people much more, right? And this is explored quite a lot in sci-fi movies and comics and so on. This is an image from Cyberpunk 2077. Another one, mind meld, the idea of conversation in pictures. So I told you before where I pull up an image, and then I share it with a friend, right? Instagram for your brain. But what if I just think of a new image, and I share it, I generate the image to be high res. I send that to, say, my wife, and she sees it. And it's going to be much faster communication than me talking face-to-face to my wife. Why? Because an image is worth 1,000 words. So with this, I'll be able to have conversations back and forth with people, my wife and others, at a much higher rate than before. So we'll be able to have better empathy, et cetera. And the word mind meld comes from Star Trek, actually. So this can be very nice and a way to increase bandwidth communication among humans. And you can even go beyond this. What if instead of I can take my brain image, I don't use the AI image gen on it, but I send the raw brain image to my wife. And at first, she won't know what it is, but over time she will, because everyone's brain is very plastic, and she can learn to understand what my brain signals look like. So she's basically taking the role of the image gen LLM, and then it's a more direct communication yet. So this is mind meld evolved. All of this sounds like science fiction. It sounds really crazy, but like I said, it's not anymore. The science is there. Of course, there can be improvements to science to improve everything else, but it's more a question of engineering and go-to-market. So what will this look like in terms of the market and so on? And it really is a question of market. Overall, I see it like the following. We have our left and right hemispheres, and then we're going to have this digital hemisphere, this third hemisphere. And that digital hemisphere, you can think of it in a mundane way as simply a local personal AI, trained just for you, aligned just with you. So from birth, right? It's like a square watermelon. From birth, it basically is aligned, aligned, aligned. But it's more than that, actually. So a famous neuroscientist talks about how we are all natural-born cyborgs. When you ride a bike, it becomes part of you. When you type on a keyboard, it becomes part of you. Why? Because you have a high bandwidth feedback back and forth. When you're riding the bike, you feel all these nuances, or typing on the keyboard. Similarly, when you use BCI, it becomes part of you if you have a high bandwidth interface. So given this, then it's going to feel like a part of you. And that's a key thing here. It's no longer this thing, this separate entity. But there's a big challenge, and this is where Web3 comes in. I purposefully only have one slide on Web3 because that's the next step. We have to crack the critical problems first. But there is this thing called the cognitive liberty challenge, also sometimes called cognitive security. The summary is your keys, your thoughts, not your keys, not your thoughts. What does this mean? Well, my neural data, my brain data, it needs to be super private, right? I don't want my private data to end up in the servers of Meta, which via the PRISM program and everything since it, ends up in the servers of NSA and other intelligence agencies throughout the world. That, to me, would be horrible, right? The problem is, I can't just keep it fully local, because in order to get all these image gen stuff to be accurate, we need to share it. We need there to be compute in between in order to take all the data to have more and more accurate models. So somehow we need to share this. Interestingly, though, and this was actually a complete coincidence initially, I've been working on Ocean Protocol since 2017, which is all about decentralized data sharing. And at the heart of that, that's decentralized access control, trustless access control. So something like Ocean itself, can be used as the middleman between my neural data and all the AI compute that's happening to have more accuracy, et cetera, et cetera. And this can be layered into the BCI killer apps. To me, it only makes sense to really go for that in earnest once we have that first killer app. But this is going to be a key part of the future. If you have a killer app and you try to roll it to market, you're going to get huge pushback on the privacy problem, the cognitive liberty challenge. This is the solution. So very much, more than anything else, your keys, your thoughts. This is more than your keys, your Bitcoin, more than your keys, your data. Your thoughts are the most sacred, the most private thing of all. And this is going to evolve. At first, the silicon stack is going to be much weaker than the bio stack, the power of it, right? But it's going to, because of the market, because there's going to be lots of money in this, just like the cell phone market and so on, it's going to get better, 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 higher and higher bandwidth. So it's going to get more powerful. And it's going to soon, at some point, get power. And remember, it's totally aligned with you. It's really part of you. We are natural-born cyborgs. And then the power of the silicon stack is going to get more powerful yet, and more powerful yet, right? So at some point, this thing could be 10x, 100x, 1,000x. The digital side of me will be 1,000x more powerful than the bio side of me. But it's still me. It's still me. We are all natural-born cyborgs. And which is kind of amazing then, because this goes back to the goal I laid out at the beginning of this talk. You have achieved human superintelligence. You are now competitive with ASI, artificial superintelligence. So I'll wrap up in a minute here. We're executing on this. This isn't just a talk anymore. And how are we executing on it? We have a team inside Ocean that is working with state-of-the-art brain-computer interfaces, FNIRs. Because it's infrared, we work in darker rooms. So here's an image of one of my colleagues doing some experiments on a computer. Here's a couple other images of my colleagues working. Here's me wearing the device. Another one. I like to think of it like this. It's cypherpunk meets cyberpunk. So the image on the left, that's me. And on the right, this is an image from cyberpunk, in this case, cyberpunk 2077 that I mentioned before. So it really is this kind of cool mix. So to conclude, AI, superintelligence is coming. You can deny it all you want, but there's so much money and power to be made that it's coming. I believe, strongly, that for humanity to play a role in the future, we need a competitive substrate to connect biology to silicon. And BCI is that bridge, brain-computer interfaces. How do we do this? Well, we bring BCI to the masses using trustless access control so that your thoughts remain yours. And with that, we unleash the free market to accelerate and unbound human intelligence. SMs, all this. And that concludes my talk. The summary is we need to be accelerating brain-computer interfaces, BCI AC, and of course, there's a Web3 twist to preserve our privacy and ensure our future. Thank you.